morning. My name is Clay Gilbert. I'm the Director of Evergreen Substance Abuse Services, and this is Tracie Hauck, the Director of the Turning Point Recovery Center. This is the first talk in a summer series, The Road to Recovery. This series will inform viewers what addiction is, what recovery is, services that are available to help people get into recovery and maintain a purposeful life. Today, I have several hats on. One is the Director of Evergreen, a program of Rutland Mental Health Services, which is part of the Community Care Network. I've worked in that position for 18 years. Another hat I have on is a licensed alcohol and drug counselor. I've been doing this work for over 30 years now. I've worked in hospitals, residential settings, worked extensively with Department of Corrections, drug courts, and worked for the Salvation Army on a 240-acre island in New Zealand for 1 year. But today, I'm going to wear a different hat. I'm going to wear the hat of a person in recovery from alcohol and drug addiction. I've been in clean and sober from alcohol and drugs since May 31st, 1986. There are many myths about treatment and recovery. Many believe treatment or recovery doesn't work. And that's because I think what people see are the people that don't do well. When alcoholics and drug addicts are using or drinking, they usually get into trouble. They get DUIs, they crash, they get into legal problems, they get into arguments, so they're very visible. There's some of those folks that go to treatment or they go to other community supports, and not everybody does well. And those are the ones that are visible. But the ones that do well, and there's a lot of those that do well, they're not as visible. They kind of melt into our community. And they don't run around with a flag saying, hey, I'm in recovery, look at me. They go back to their job, raising their family, teaching Little League, being part of their church community or other communities, whatever they do. They just kind of melt into the community. So a lot of people don't believe that alcohol and drug addiction really has effective treatment or recovery, but it really does. So I'm going to tell a little bit about my own story, and hopefully that can give some folks some hope. Because I think that's the one thing that sometimes gets very discouraging for people that are caught in the middle of alcohol and drug addiction or family members that live with a person with that problem, is that after a while, people start losing hope. People say, oh, I'm going to do it this time. I'm going to stop drinking. I'm going to stop using drugs. And at that moment, they really mean it. And their family wants to believe them. But then, many of them aren't able to do it. It's kind of like, the person says, okay, I'm going to change my diet, I'm going to exercise, and by, March 31st, I'm going to lose 20 pounds. Well, that's great that people want to do that, but many of them don't really make it. It doesn't make them bad people. It just, a lot of things are very difficult. A lot of people start using alcohol and drugs, not to become addicted, but to become part of a group. It feels good. It seems to make them happy in the beginning. And walking away from something that seems to make you feel good is very difficult for many people. So I'm from the Northeast Kingdom, and I was raised by my grandparents. I was born in 1955. I'm not afraid to say that, but back then, most people were raised by their biological parents. It's a little different now. But I was in a small town, and everybody else, at least it seemed to me, they were raised by their biological parents, and I was raised by my grandparents. So I always felt a little different. My grandparents were very strict, so I didn't have a lot of freedom. So I was very socially awkward. I didn't really know I wasn't really part of the gang, so to speak. I didn't know how to talk to people very well. I always felt embarrassed, and I felt different. And then, when I was a young teenager, I tried alcohol. I tried beer to start with, and I felt different. This felt pretty good. And then when I got around other people and I'd been drinking a little bit, I could interact with them. I could tell stories. I could make them laugh. I could do all kinds of things. And even though I didn't start drinking regularly then, I remembered that feeling. It's like, oh, when I get old enough to where I can drink as much as I want, I'll use this because this seems to be a good way for me to navigate through the world. Now, my family, extended family, uncles, aunts, even my parents, even though I wasn't raised by them, most people in my family had an alcohol problem or a drug problem, but back then mostly it was alcohol. And I always said to myself, I'll never be like them. I know I can do it different. You know, if I just control it, if I just, you know, I know I can do it because it makes me feel good. I don't act like them. Every time the family gets together, they're arguing and getting into fights and all that, and I don't want that, but I know I can do it differently. And then also, when I ended up starting using drugs, went in the service, Vietnam era veteran, didn't go to Vietnam, which I'm very grateful for, but during that time, alcohol, particularly alcohol, was almost encouraged in the military. So my drinking went through the roof. Continued to use a lot of other drugs and whatnot. And at first, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. It was all fun at first. It was a blast. Some people say, oh, you only think you're having fun. No, I was really having a good time. And but then some trouble started happening. You know, I got a DUI. Wasn't really my fault, I thought. You know, it wasn't fair, that sort of thing. Got in some scrapes in the military that I was able to talk my way out of. Because then again, you know, it wasn't really my fault. It was circumstances. It was somebody else's fault. I never wanted to look at the alcohol, the drugs, that they were the problem. I didn't drink every day. I didn't drug every day. So I thought, you know, I don't really have a problem. It's these other circumstances. So I got out of the military, ended up getting married, having a couple kids. And for a while, I was trying to be good, so to speak. So I didn't drink. I really put a cap on my drinking and drugging. But then I found myself going on binges. And I didn't always go on a binge, but the one thing that I can say now why that really made it very uncontrollable for me is whenever I picked up a drink, I couldn't guarantee what the outcome would be. And what I mean by that, I might say, okay, tonight I'm going to, after work, it's a Friday night, I'm going to stop at the bar, have 2 beers, and then go home. And I could do that. A week later, 2 weeks later, whatever the case might be, I'm going to stop at the bar on a Friday night, have 2 beers, and go home. And I wouldn't show up home till Saturday or maybe even Sunday. So I could never predict exactly what would happen once I put alcohol in my body. And there was always drugs mixed in there too. So it was putting a lot of stress on my family, certainly putting a lot of stress on my marriage. And finally in 1982 was my first try at getting sober. So I went to treatment. I went to a hospital for 7 days and got some education. I was pretty healthy at that time. I was young, and I didn't drink every day, so I didn't go through any real detox, but alcohol definitely to me caused problems. But in my own mind, well, I can still smoke marijuana because, you know, marijuana doesn't really cause any problems. And in my own mind, you know, when I drank, I would, you know, get a DUI. By this time I had 3 or 4 of them. I would get a DUI, I'd get in a fight, argument with my wife, be hungover, whatever the case might be. So alcohol was, in my own mind, bad. Marijuana, not so much so. You know, I'd smoke a joint, watch Bugs Bunny, eat Frosted Flakes, and go to bed. Get up in the morning, no hangover, felt fine, you know, nobody's mad at me, no legal problems. So, you know, as long as I give up the alcohol, I'll be okay. I didn't understand that my brain didn't really know the difference between one substance and another. All my brain cells know is either they're being stimulated or put to sleep. And my brain cells liked being, you know, altered. So when I went to treatment, they said, Clay, for you to be successful, you're going to have to give up everything. And I looked at them and I said, you know, that's probably true of most of the people that come through here. But you don't know who I am. I'm different. And I really believed that. And I was able to do that for a while. And probably after a while, maybe a year, 10 months, something like that, I picked up a drink. And then I didn't pick up one for another 6 months, and I picked up a drink again. And before you know it, I was back where I was, only worse, in no time. So in 1986, my wife really had enough. She had enough of my crap because I wasn't a very good husband. And I tried to be a good father, but I wasn't as good as I could be, that's for sure. And she finally booted me out of the house. And rightfully so, and I'm very glad that she did, because that really brought me to my knees. And the reason it did is because, as I said early on, I'd been raised by my grandparents. I knew what it was like for a kid not to be raised by their parents. And I almost promised myself that I would not put my children through that. But yet, alcohol and drugs gave me what I most didn't want in life to happen. And that just crushed me. So, again, I went to treatment. I went to the VA first in White River Junction. That's when they had a residential program there. I went there for 28 days. Then I went to Serenity House down in Wallingford. I went there for another 28 days. And then I went to Grace House, which is here in Rutland. At the time, it was a halfway house. I lived there for 14 months. And little by little, I put my life together. And if anybody thinks that, oh, if I just quit drinking and drugging, life is going to be great, well, no, it's not at first, because it's what I call aftershocks. You know, it's like you have an earthquake, which was, you know, me getting booted out of the house, but then there was a lot of aftershocks after. I had bills to pay, relationships to repair. I had, you know, a couple legal things to clean up. I had some medical things to clean up. I had a variety of things to clean up. Plus, I didn't know how to act. See, during your teenage years, they're very formative years. Those are years that you're learning about your morals, your belief in the world, how to have relationships, what intimacy means, the things that you want to stand for, what you want to do for a vocation. And during those years, I was drinking and drugging. So I learned all those things from a drinking and drugging perspective. So when I got clean and sober, I didn't know how to act in a lot of situations. And I can remember thinking, my God, I've gone to treatment, I'm going to a ton of self-help meetings, I'm reading all these books on self-improvement and this and that and the other thing, and going to church. I was doing everything I could to try to get better. And people would say, how you doing? And I'd think, well, I'm doing all this stuff to get better, so that means I got to let them know that I'm doing okay, or else they'll think I'm a bad recovering person. So I'd say, oh, I'm doing fine, life is great, la, la, la. And inside I was dying. And after talking to some people that I was close with, it finally dawned on me that at first recovery is supposed to be tough. And once I accepted that, it wasn't as tough anymore. And I think it's good that it's tough, because it made me value it. I always use the explanation of, it's like if you have two kids that want a bicycle. And one kid goes up to dad and says, I want a new bicycle. And dad says, okay, and buys him a bicycle. And then another kid says, I want a bicycle. And dad says, well, you better work for it, better get a job and save your money. So he mows lawns, delivers papers, whatever, saves up his money and gets the bicycle. Well, which kid's going to take better care of the bicycle? Obviously the one that had to work for it. And I believe that's true with recovery. And to say about the joys of recovery, I mean, it's nothing that I can, sometimes it's hard to put my finger on. But the one thing that I do believe is it helps me live the way that I believe I should live. Anybody that's ever abused alcohol and drugs I've ever met, everybody has a set of morals. Everybody has a set of what they believe is right and what is wrong. And everybody that's ever used alcohol and drugs and had a problem with them always breaks their own rules. They always break their own morals. And that kills a person's spirit. And now I can live by what I believe is right. And that's made my spirit stronger. And, you know, I remember being in bars and sitting on a bar, you know, half in the bag and saying, I'm going to do all these great things, doing all these great things, and never did anything. But now I can say, gee, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to go on vacation next year, whatever the case might be, and I can actually put the pieces together and I can do it. I can accomplish things. I've repaired my relationships. I've had a meaningful place in the world now. I feel good about myself. I don't wake up in the morning with a hangover. That's really nice, actually. And I don't wake up feeling guilty or that I don't remember what I did last night, but I know it wasn't good, and hiding from people because I was afraid of what I might have done the night before. Yeah, life still has its problems, you know, things happen in life, but at least it's not created by the alcohol or the drugs. I don't have to blame things on other people anymore. My own life, you know, if I make a mistake, it's mine. It's no one else's fault. It's not, oh, it's the cop's fault, it's my wife's fault, it's my boss' fault, anything like that. And I want to put this as a guarantee, and I want to save some time for Tracie, because I know she's got a lot of important things to say, but if you're having trouble with alcohol or drugs, there is help, there is hope, you can improve your life. It doesn't have to be that way. It really doesn't. Life can be what you can imagine it to be. In fact, I will guarantee this to you. And I'm very careful about guaranteeing anything. But if you picture right now what you'd like your life to be in 5 years, I will guarantee that if you get into recovery and you do the work and you really change your life and become the person that you were meant to be, that whatever you think your life could be in 5 years, you would have sold yourself short. Because I will guarantee that it will be much more than that. So I want to thank everyone for taking the time to listening to me, and now I'd like to pass it over to Tracie.
Thank you, Clay. That was very inspirational, and a lot of things I can relate to. I have been the director of the Turning Point Center of Rutland since 2015. I'm also a person in long-term recovery, which started in May 15th, 2013. My story is, I don't know, a little bit different than your average story. I was a registered nurse for 29 years, worked here in Rutland. Well respected in my job, and I had a back injury that started when I lived in Florida, and I got prescribed prescription opiates, and that was back in, I don't know, 98, I think. And at that point in my life, I was not in a very happy place. I was not really happy in my marriage, and I was scared to do anything about it. It wasn't anything dreadful. It was just not a happy marriage. It wasn't abusive or anything like that. But, when I took those pills for pain, the best way I can explain it is it gave me a sense of well-being. And that sense of well-being was so welcome at that point because, emotionally I was dragged down. I wasn't happy. I was able to function in my roles when I took the pills because I wasn't bogged down emotionally. And, I kind of, off and on, I had those prescriptions. There were periods of time when I didn't have any and, I would be miserable and, and then later in, I moved from Florida back to Vermont in 2005 and got a job here in Rutland and, didn't use any prescriptions at that point. Had a flare-up of my back and got a prescription and, it's just so insidious how it happens. You take it, you get that sense of well-being. And me being a registered nurse, Vicodin was my drug of choice. And I lived in a good part of town. Nobody knew I had an issue. My husband, my daughter didn't know I had an issue. And I could function. I felt like I could function great as a nurse. I could work hard. I could be a mom. I could be a wife. I could do all those things, and I didn't have to worry about how I felt emotionally. And I continued to escalate my use, and I got to the point where I was forging prescriptions because you could phone in Vicodin then. And then in May, I think it was the 14th, actually, when I got caught. Of 2013, I got reported by a doctor that I actually had worked for a number of years because I was using his names in the prescriptions. And my life just changed. When you have a secret addiction like I had, you have to break the news to everybody. When you lose your nursing license and you have no job, and my daughter was a senior in high school. My husband had no clue. I was very afraid to tell them. And I wanted to keep it a secret. I didn't want to go out in town. And it was devastating. I mean, if the ground could have opened up and swallowed me, I would have gone. And, I had to work with a licensed alcohol and drug counselor at that time through the nursing board. And she'd recommended I go to a 12-step meeting. So the first 12-step meeting I went to happened to be at the Turning Point Center of Rutland, which I had no clue what that place was. And first of all, at that point in my life, I would never go down on State Street after dark by myself because I heard rumors, And so I went to that meeting, and I was scared to death to walk in. And But what I felt when I walked in there was just acceptance and no judgment, and just felt welcomed. Didn't have to share my story. So I continued going to those meetings, and then eventually within a few months I started volunteering down there. And, you know, I used to think that I was different than everybody else, just like Clay said, because I wasn't, you know, on the streets, I wasn't buying pills on the street, I wasn't using heroin, I hadn't been to rehab, I hadn't been to jail. And it took me a while being involved that I realized that, you know, we're all just people. And, you know, the people that unfortunately have addictions, that are out on the street, that are couch surfing, that have no places, they've just been in it longer and they've ruined a lot of things. And maybe they didn't have, you know, you got generational substance use disorder, you've got, you know, traumatic childhood events. They weren't as privileged as I was. And, you know, so it kind of shed away that all those differences, and I realized how much we were alike, and we were all humans, and you know, it became my passion. And I worked hard to get my nursing license back, and I got more and more involved in the center. And then, you know, when the previous director of the center left, I was afraid of what would happen to the center. I was afraid that, you know, there wasn't anybody to step up to the plate, and I was afraid it would close. And where would these people go? Who would they have? So I stepped up and became director. And, you know, we've expanded programs there. I mean, I don't care what anybody's crimes are. I don't care what their past is. I don't care what they've done. It's when you're at that point in early recovery, and you don't know where to turn, and you're so ashamed and you're so vulnerable, you don't feel like you're worth anything. And you have to have people that believe in you. You have to have people that stand by you. I'm not talking about enabling you, but stand by you and see you as a human being, and help you to see the small successes you have early in recovery. Because I remember when I was early in recovery, I'd be so proud of myself, like, oh, I got this far. And then something would happen, and I wouldn't have a relapse, but something would happen, and I felt like I was a failure. And, you know, and when that happens with people, you know, if they have a relapse, you know, you have to look at what did they do? Did they come to the center and get support? Did they reach out and get services? You know, it's progress, not perfection. It's changing your whole behaviors. It's really doing that inside look on where your weaknesses are, where your vulnerabilities are, and really being able to be honest with yourself. And, you know, I'm a firm believer in developing your own internal dialogue, you know, things that really mean to you, because there's a lot of people that know the spiel. You know, they know what to say to act like they're doing well, but they don't always internalize it. And they need help with that, and they need gentle guidance to kind of point that out to them. And that's what I believe is so beneficial with peer support. And my recovery wouldn't be what it is today if I hadn't gotten involved with Turning Point Center. I honestly believe that, and that's the greatest gift, you know, and I just want other people to know you know, you can't do anything wrong enough that we're going to shut the door on you. You're always welcome at Turning Point Center, wherever you're at any of your stage in recovery, and even if you struggle to stay clean. People just need to feel accepted and looked at as human beings that struggle, because we all have struggles. And it's a lifelong journey. And I think a lot of people I've met early in recovery, they feel like once they get in recovery, they're never going to have that craving or trigger again. And that's just not true. You're going to have moments that things will be going good, and it just pops up at the most inconvenient time, or convenient time, or when things are going well. And they feel like a failure. But I think you have to accept that as realization, that you are going to go through that. And you're going to have times where you're going to think it sounds good to drink or use drugs. But you have to have the internal dialogue going on in your head so you can think long-term and get through it. And, you know, I urge anybody, you know, if you're scared and you don't know who to turn to, you're welcome to call the Turning Point and just have a conversation. It doesn't mean you have to sign up for anything, but just have a conversation. So thank you. What do we need to finish up on, Clay? What points haven't we hit?
Well, I'm not sure. I was just, I was thinking that, one of the things I have is a background in martial arts. I was thinking as you were talking. And one thing my sensei used to say is that all rivers and streams end up in the ocean. So it doesn't really matter how you get into recovery. Whether it's through the Turning Point, through AA, through NA, through Evergreen, through residential treatment, through your pastor, whatever the case might be. But you got to get in the water.
Yes.
If you don't get in the water, you're not going to end up in the ocean. So you got to get in the water. And, it's called Turning Point. Call me at Evergreen, 747-3588. Talk to somebody. If you know somebody that's in recovery, talk to them. Talk to somebody you trust. Talk to your doctor. Talk to somebody, because, the worst thing, I think, is trying to keep all that inside. And if you don't let it out and finally say it out loud, it's not real. But once you say it out loud, it's real. And then it's like, okay, now I've said it out loud to somebody, I got to do something about it. So that's really all I got. Do you have any last minute thoughts?
I think the biggest thing that I want to say is I think connection. You need to establish a connection with some other people in recovery, wherever you get that. Or whether it's, through religion or it doesn't matter to me where, but you've got to have some people that you let in and know that you're in recovery so that they can support you. And you can't do it alone. I mean, and I know so many times, I've heard that, and it's true, you can't be up here by yourself without adult supervision when you're in recovery. You need people to help kind of keep you accountable, that you can talk to if you're having thoughts of using again. And the fact that if you reach out to them is building a stronger foundation for yourself. It's building new patterns. So when you struggle, you're getting into a new habit of reaching out for help before you crash and burn, And people, I don't know, I just want people to really realize that, it doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter what economic class you're in. It doesn't matter. Addiction, I mean, I firmly believe that everybody probably has somebody in their family they can look at that says maybe he has a problem. And I think, we got to get rid of the stigma, or more people are just not going to seek help.
So I think I'd just like to end, I'd like to thank people for taking the time to view this. And like I said at the beginning, there is going to be a summer series. There's going to be some upcoming ones on some special programming for adolescents who may be struggling, what different treatment and recovery resources there are available, specifically in the different types of treatments, perhaps some other doctors or experts. There's going to be a series of these things, and hopefully this series can help educate people so that, it's not about moral or being a bad person. It's about really having a disease and what to do about it. And once you realize that, once you're aware of it, then there is some responsibility to do something about it. And I just hope that people do tune in for the summer series, and hopefully it's helpful for the community.